Congress to stand up to the president. There is a lot Congress can do to stop an executive who's bent on violating the law. It requires us to use the formula prescribed by James Madison in Federalist 58, and more importantly, a formula that's built into the text of the Constitution, which is that Congress can't appropriate, the president can't appropriate a dime by himself. He can't just create money. He can't authorize himself money. It all has to come from Congress. What Madison explained is that the greatest protection for the people against overreach by the president or against bad government programs is for Congress to refuse to fund certain activities that Congress disapproves. Now, that takes a lot of will that we have to exercise, will that I hope we will exercise if he starts doing some of these things. For example, in theory, Congress could pass legislation that would withhold funds from the president, say none of this money that we're appropriating to, for example, the Department of Homeland Security may be used to grant legal status to someone who, under our immigration laws, is not eligible for a green card or is not eligible for legal status. That's tricky, but it could be done. It is not going to be easy. The biggest reason why it's not going to be easy is that there is one thing that is very, very difficult to do, almost impossible to do, if you have a president who doesn't want to enforce the laws. So we can withhold money to prevent him from doing something that takes money to do, but it's almost impossible for us to force him to enforce the law, even though the Constitution contemplates that that's his job. It's impossible for us to force him to do that. You cannot get a court order enjoining the President of the United States, forcing him to do that which he's unwilling to do. But we can make his life difficult by slashing important parts of the appropriations that he's asking for in order to run these departments.
You don't give me much hope.
And my purpose is not to give you hope as much as it is to answer the question honestly. So this is the best we can do right now. It's one of the reasons why we have to be so careful about who we elect as President of the United States. It's also, by the way, another example of why it's important for us to restore the proper balance of authority between state power and federal power. We've got so much power vested in Congress, and so much of that power is so dependent on how the President of the United States wants to enforce or not enforce, or interpret, or effectively rewrite, that for that reason alone, we should be leery about giving too much power to Congress. Now, this is one area, in the area of immigration and naturalization, where there is federal power. It's just that he's refusing to enforce the law as it's written. He's trying to rewrite the law on his own. It's very difficult to rein in. But one thing we know for sure is that as long as the Senate remains under the control of the President's party, the Senate will do everything it can, under its current majority leader, to protect the President in doing this. At least we'll have a shot at it if we can get a Republican majority.
Anybody else have a question for the Senator? Really quick, there's some people that came in late. I want to introduce you to Heather Grant. And you don't probably don't know her, but Heather Grant ran against Tom. And ever since then, she has been going around the state campaigning for him. That's Heather Grant. One of our state representatives, John Hardister. Jody came in late. She's part of the conservative Tea Party group here. And does anybody have any other questions? You want to wrap it up, Senator?
Can we get a picture of all the C4GC members with Senator Lee? Does he mind doing that?
Did you meet Clarence Henderson?
He did.
Okay, well, he's got a question for you. That's pretty heavy duty.
My question is the messaging of the Republican Party. I don't hear enough conversation about the values that the Republican Party represents. There seems to be an educational that needs to be expressed is not being expressed. It seems to me that the Republican Party is at an appeasement point where they're always on defense instead of going on offense. When you're losing, you have to change your strategy. And I don't hear them talking about the principle-driven, the principle movement of the Republican Party, such as things they've done, especially when you see where the Democratic Party, how they have massaged blacks, to cause them to believe that they are for them when they are not. And so my question is, how do we get some of the Republican Party to become outspoken and become bold? Because they are the ones that represent us and get to speak more than anybody else.
First of all, Clarence, I'm so honored to have met you today, and I'm going to keep this with me. This is a little story about Clarence's experience back in 1960. And he told me that he was part of that sit-in. I said, you must have been about 4 years old at the time. It turns out he was 19, and so he hides his age well. Anyway, honored to meet you, and I feel like I've met an amazingly important historical figure today, which of course The question that Clarence asked is as important as any question that we face as a party right now, and I'm so glad you raised it. Sometimes as Republicans, we have become content with talking about what we're against. So much so that we don't talk about what we're for and why we're for it. Now don't get me wrong, it's important to be against things that are bad in government. In fact, we have an affirmative duty to call things out when they are not as they should be. And especially when you have a president who has not shown a lot of respect for the rule of law and for constitutional limitations, not only on his power, but on the power of the federal government as a whole. We do have to call those things out, but we have to do more. I want to harken back to a story from a couple hundred years ago. December of 1773, there were a group of Americans who boarded a ship in Boston Harbor because they were fed up with their national government. They had it with a national government that taxed them too much and regulated them too oppressively. It was so far from the people that it was slow to respond to their needs. And they seized crates of tea, English tea, and cast it overboard into the harbor in symbolic protest against the kind of national government they did not want and would no longer tolerate or support. Fortunately, they didn't stop there. Had they stopped there, what we now call the Boston Tea Party would be relegated to at most an obscure footnote in American history. But they didn't stop there. In the coming years, they declared, fought for, and won our independence as a nation. It took them 14 years from that moment in 1773 in Boston to get to Philadelphia in 1787, where they embraced the kind of government that we did want. We don't have 14 years to go from merely opposing the kind of government we don't want to embracing the kind of government we do want. We don't have 14 years. We've got to turn this around faster. Fortunately, we already know what that government looks like, and that government looks in many, many ways. Like that document they came up with in 1787, subject to 27 amendments, of course. But it still looks more or less the same. That's kind of the model. But within that government, there's a lot we can do within that framework. What we've got to explain is that what we're for is for economic opportunity. Limited government isn't what we're for just because limited government in the abstract is a good idea, although I insist it is. We're for limited government, not just because limited government's awesome, but because of what people do when they're free. When people are free, when they're not burdened by an excessive government, the voluntary associations that free people form are what make it possible for someone to be born into poverty and retire comfortably. They're what make economic opportunity a possibility in America. And so that's why I've devoted the last 2 years of my life to developing, and it's still a work in progress, but I've been developing a reform agenda, a government reform agenda that is at once unapologetically conservative, and focused on demonstrating how these conservative principles can enhance economic mobility in America, about how we can figure out ways to make higher education more affordable, how it is that we can make sure that more people have access to housing that's affordable and that's close to where they live. We can do these things through conservative reform principles. For example, we can give them access to more affordable housing that's more accessible to where they live if we just change the way we fund transportation infrastructure. If we shift some of this funding and appropriations authority, the revenue collection and spending authority, away from Washington and back to the states, we can give more people more access to the kind of housing they want that's closer to where they want to work. We collect right now 18.4 cents on every gallon of gasoline that you buy. That money goes to Washington. It's run through Washington's filter. Washington sends a bunch of that money back to the states, attached to a huge stack of regulations that adds 20 or 30% to every construction project that uses federal funds. My idea is let's reduce that 18.4 cents per gallon down to 3.7 cents per gallon. Let the states collect the differential, 14.7 cents per gallon. They can make each dollar stretch an additional 20 to 30% if we do it that way, and they can put it where the state local officials decide that's most needed. That in turn translates into more people having more access to more housing that they can afford that's close to where they need to work. These are the kinds of principles that we need to be embracing. And one of the problems that we've had is that we've been stuck, number one, in talking about what we're against rather than talking about what we're for. Number two, we don't explain why. Don't explain why we're conservatives. We are conservatives not in spite of our compassion. We are conservative because we are compassionate. It is our conservatism that makes us inclusive. We're just terrible at communicating. That's got to change, and I need Tom Tillis's help to bring about that change. Thank you for listening.
We're going to make it the last question. I'll tell you.
I don't really have
That's
a
my
question.
wife. So, if you don't mind, yeah.
I just have a quick interjection. I got a message from Tyson, who is Judge Tyson's wife. She is trying her best to get here before you leave. She got stuck in traffic. She lives near Fayetteville, and said she should be here momentarily.
Well, we'll see how the clock goes.
He's in the race that has 19 judges in it. So she's interested to talk to everybody anyway. Either way it goes, she's coming.
Again, let's go ahead and give the senator a great hand. Come on, C for G's. You wanted a picture? Get up quick. He's on the chat.
I'm not either. When I get a job, it only costs $30.
I used to work as a photographer in my summer job. Now, that was fun because I used to do my own developing and stuff. Good seeing you. How you feeling? Listen, how you feeling? You doing good?
A little bit of love from AJ, always good. It's a good thing. How you
Good job, the Greater Greensboro Women.
What you're doing, you give a great speech. That is exactly what we need to be hearing. Next.
Next, Greater Greensboro Women.
Y'all don't have any buttons.
Jody.
I'm an associate.
What are you doing, you may ask?
I thought you just wanted me to stand there and hold that.
Yeah, I did.
Don't get it.
Everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. You know the joke on that tractor is
Next, you're around. We'll get our district.
It's an old joke. Y'all are so easy. I
have been asked if we can take account for any of us that are staying here at Darryls for lunch. Raise your hand.
Thank you.
In that other room?
We're going to send it for you right now.
Thank
Thank you.
And I don't know if my computer's locked. I couldn't find it.
Oh, you made it. You made it.
Except for the pictures, that's all that counts, right? The t-shirt. I did, yeah. I'm the car from last night's meeting.
Stay for lunch?
Yeah, I am. Are you guys gonna go with it?
Where we used to meet.
Did y'all have a big crowd?
For Greensboro,
Are they everywhere? Or are they just pretty much gone?
they're sort of half and half. We've got some that are going into lunch and then others that are over there talking to the senator.
Well, I tell you, it's hard to do everything, and we wanted to come here for this group. This was very supportive, and all of these elections are so important.
Yes, ma'am. When I leave here, I got to mark Walker's headquarters. Then I have this afternoon, I got an email Susan tell us about something that's come up, and then
She's great.
she is.
I really have enjoyed getting to know her and hearing her. She's a really good speaker.
Well, you know that statement, which is true, behind every great man is a great woman. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. You gotta go, right?
Well, I think behind every good woman, sometimes there's a very good man too.
Oh, yes. Well, you got to have somebody to back you all the time. The lone wolf is not very.
It's definitely a partnership.
Oh, yes. Getting things done here in Greensboro during the weekday is sometimes problematic. Well, getting things done in North Carolina on a weekday.
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Very good.
I don't know if you know the name, Shane Krauser. Is that Shane Krauser? Ring a bell?
Well, we were just talking, I befriended him on Facebook, but I don't think Shane
Shane was been here North Carolina. He's from Mesa, Arizona. But he's been here at least 3, maybe 4 times.
I think he's at Hillsdale.
Maybe.
Oh, okay.
I don't know about that.
Like we didn't see each other like 2 days ago.
But he moderated the prior to the primary when all the politicians were together. He moderated that event at GDCC in Jamestown. You eating?
I don't know, we were so late and didn't figure that we could.
Thank you for taking a moment to speak with us. Are you on the ballot?
No, but I'd rather do something. You were across the room.
You're in Greensboro. Too young for that. Huh?
I'm full guy by yourself.
Were you in school there?
Oh, yeah.
He's very active. Very active. Yeah.
So what do you do now?
I know the people to do it.
Your whole career has been with the right or with the like insurance?
In my life, I kind of do that.
You know, John, council down at Shawnee County in Fayetteville. Because he was going to say, where? I went to school with him. His sister, Edna, Paul, the councils of the colleges in Montgomery County are very connected. And they had their homecoming at Willis Creek Church last Sunday. So I went down there. Edna Council Paul's husband, Richard, and my father, and our children, every one of those children finished high school and went to technical school or college. Eddie Paul is a district court judge here down in Cumberland County. And Steve Paul, his brother, works for Capital Bank. And Edna Paul is deceased. Ella, daughter Charlotte, George Chambers. And Ruthie was senior vice president of the Home Federal Bill, the oldest, made career Air Force out in Carolina, passed away. Finished and we work hard. We work in the fields and every time I see Eddie on the court, I said, how you doing? He said, it's tough. But I want you to give you a few more I'm hoping to.
I'm gonna get a excited to drive some people.
Well, I'll tell you, what is it that touch you traditionally starts dinner?
I'll be there.
What's your name? Oh, yes. You asked for the more
Good to meet you. Are you leaving? Okay, good. Well, we'll see you inside.
I'm going to see you around the world.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, for a minute. You're gonna continue, stay? Are you staying for lunch? Yeah, and John, you have to pay for yourself.
That's fine. Oh, that's great. We'll be glad to do that.
Okay, then.
Are you staying for lunch?
Great. You have to pay for yourself too.
Well, that's great. Let's go on in there.
You want me to do one with this one too? Then we'll have it. Oh, okay, I'll do that one. Okay, great.
Y'all know how to use it. I'll show you how to use
Here,
it.
you do that one, I'll do this one.
Are you with the Raleigh Times or no?
I'm Greater Greensboro Republican Womens.
Got it?
Yep.
Thank you. Good meeting you. Let's go in and have some lunch. If you're staying, that's wonderful. Okay.
Quick question. Do you happen to know Lacey Ward Jr.?
No, I sure don't.
He's the new director of the Civil Rights Museum downtown, and he's been looking for people to partner with him to want to push it a different way and expand like the knowledge of the area, the schools, and everything. And we talked to John about it. I work for John Harster. And we met with him, talked about it and stuff, and John's been kind of looking to reach out to people. And I'm sure it just slipped his mind to ask you, but I was going to see if that might be something you'd be interested in.
Yeah, it is the same.
Because he wants to make it more of about what it, like, the fight of liberty, more than just a single race or anything. And he also wants to partner with schools and like all local universities and bringing in more information. And he has this one idea to have like journal entries of students during the civil rights movement and have them from different schools brought in and digitalized and have like a exhibit where you can look at what students actually were thinking and saying and doing. And there's a lot more to that, but I was going to try to get your information to send to him, and that way you guys have to link up.
Okay. Yeah, I've been supposed to have been meeting with John, but I haven't had a chance. I got his phone number, but I haven't called.
Well, that might be honestly probably what it was about then.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, I will make sure John either gets a hold of you or